Hi, I'm Nina Melendez, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, a show about the world of work and our place in it. Now, decision-making happens every moment of every day, and at times it seems like the most difficult thing to do. Add in risk, deadlines, or enormous consequences, and suddenly making choices can be paralyzing. So how can we be smart about our decision-making, and how can we use it for our professional and personal success? Joining me now is Dan Ariely. He is a professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University. He is the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Predictably Irrational. He has a PhD in cognitive psychology from UNC Chapel Hill and also a PhD in business administration from Duke. He received his BA from Tel Aviv University. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me.
It's great to have you on. Dan, first, let's start with what goes on in our brain when we need to make a choice about something.
So there's lots of types of choices. As you said, making choices is kind of something we just do. That's the way we behave. And there are lots of choices that we don't even pay attention to them being choices. Things like habits or things that we do without thinking or that we got used to. And those things get kind of lubricated by experience. You can say the more we make a decision, the easier it is for us to make that same decision. Then we keep on making it and making it, even if it's not. We don't think of it as a real decision. Like think about my coffee. I don't sit and say, what kind of coffee do I want? No, I have a very standard routine. I don't think of it as a coffee, and that reinforces itself. And that's kind of it gets an addition of the emotional side of the brain where things just become fluid. And then there are the big decisions, the one we face and we think and we take up an Excel spreadsheet and we do cost and benefit analysis, and then we try to get the cognitive system to be more in charge, but we make lots of mistakes there as well.
So my question is, why do we hesitate when we talk about the big decisions, not the ones that we make every day and that are no longer really decisions in our mind, they're just part of the course. When it comes to big decisions, why is it that we hesitate? Is it that we don't trust ourselves, or is there a more biological or physiological reason for that hesitation?
Yeah, so a big part of it is that we don't want to experience regret. And if you think about what regret really is, regret is the feeling that says, I should have known better. I should have made a better decision, and we really don't want to feel regret. So consider the following two cases. Case number one: you drive to the office there and back every day. One day on the way back, a tree falls on your car, crashes it, total loss. How unhappy are you? You're unhappy, but how unhappy are you? Condition number two: you drive to the office back and forth. One day you decide to take a different path home. You take the long route home. On the way, a tree falls on your car, crashes it, total loss. How unhappy are you in the second case? And obviously we would be more unhappy in the second case. Why? Because you are able to ask yourself, why did I do that? If you take the same path every day, you don't ask yourself, why did I take the same path? It's obvious that's what you should have done. But if you take a different path, that creates an opportunity for regret. And that comes also when we make decisions. Every time we make a decision, there's a possibility of regret. And because we don't want to be in the future and say, why did I do that? We often don't make decisions.
I was going to ask you actually about regret and how the fear of regret plays in. So I'm glad you answered that. Is it true, that old adage that says that you are more likely to regret the things you didn't do than the things that you did do? Is that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It really depends on the time perspective. So when you think about day-to-day life, the things that we do are more regretful. Why? Because we notice them. Oh, I took this turn, or I used my phone when I was walking down the street and I bumped into something.
Or, I bought that timeshare in Sedona.
We can talk about that if you
I shouldn't have bought that timeshare.
In the short term, the things we do are much more salient. But we experience things in what we call narrow bracketing. We experience day by day by day. In the long term, and this research was done by Tom Gilovich, and one experiment was with academics. He went to old people's home and he asked some academics, what do you regret? And very few people say, oh, there was just one more paper I wish I wrote. No, most people regretted not spending enough time with their family, not develop a hobby, not investing in relationships. So in the long-term time perspective, we regret very different things. And that's actually a problem, right? Because what you optimize for regret in the short term is not the things to optimize for regret in the long term. And we have to come up with some kind of mix of those things. We can't just optimize the short term, and we certainly can't live with just optimizing the long term.
Can we talk about intuition and how intuition factors into decision making? And
Yeah.
whether also, my second part to that question is whether intuition is emotional or whether it's cognitive.
Yeah. So intuition is mostly emotional. And I don't mean that it has high emotions, but think about a chess player. A chess player gets lots and lots and lots of experience with very different sets, and they look at the board, and before they analyze specifically what is going on, they have a sense of whether it's a good board or not a good board for them, and which direction to take the next path. Unlike a computer that scans all the options, they basically scan only a few options in one direction. That's what intuitions mean. They kind of narrow our field and focus us on some things. But of course, chess is very unique. There are very few cases like chess, and in most cases, our intuitions are actually not that good. We have some intuitions from nature. For example, if you look at birds, they're afraid of snakes. They are born afraid of snakes. They have a part of the brain that is dedicated to detect snakes and be afraid of that. That's a great intuition. They have it. We have some things like that as well. But most of our intuitions are not as good. And we don't have enough time to develop them. Think about something like romantic relationship or interviewing people for work. We see a person, let's say it's an interview for a job, and we have a feeling of whether they would work out or not. If we think they'll work out, we might hire them. If we think they don't, we will not hire them. But our opportunities for learning are very limited. First of all, we don't hire that many people. Unlike chess players who play hours every day, we hire very few people in our lives. We also date very few people, generally speaking. And also, remember that we don't get to learn about the people we reject. So if there's somebody we decide not to date or somebody we decide not to hire, we will never learn. Maybe they would have been really good. So lots of times our ability to make decision-making actually hurt our ability to learn. Can you think about what is the one case where we are forced to spend time with people that we didn't predict we would like?
I would say at work.
Work is one example. College roommates is another example. And of course, arranged marriages is another one of those. And what is happening with college roommates is really interesting. Lots of people report that their college roommates are some of the best friends they have. But when you ask them in the beginning, they often don't get along. So it's not as if on day one, people say, oh, yes, this is the person who's going to be my best lifelong friend. No, and that's because our intuition is so bad. People don't understand how it will develop later. So in most cases, intuitions are these quick decision-making that have an element of truth. It's not that they're completely off, but the element of truth is relatively small, but our reliance of it is very high. So this is why we make mistakes. We rely on a weak signal as if it's a very, very strong signal, and we make mistakes.
Dan, I want to pause the conversation very quickly and say hi to some of the folks who are joining us in the live stream. We've got Lisa from San Francisco, Austin from Dallas, Kayla from Ohio, Dale from Atlanta, and Stephen from Virginia. Thanks for joining the show. Feel free to ask Dan any questions, put them in the stream. We'll try and get those answered for you. Dan, let's talk about stress and decision making under stress. Would you say that people make better or worse decisions under stress generally? I find personally that I make better decisions under stress. I think that I'm more efficient and that I'm quicker and that I don't overthink.
Yeah. So the answer is that lots of people think that they make better decisions under stress. There's no evidence for that. But in general, when we think about stress, there are two types of stress. There's predictable stress and there's unpredictable stress. Predictable stress could be something like a deadline, or lots of work to finish in the short term, or something like that. And predictable stress is just something we have to deal with, but it's not really stressful. It's not really changing our cognitive ability. And some people, and I think that's what you were talking about, many people believe that under stress they work better. So people say, oh, I need to not work on this deadline until 2 days before, and then I really get into it and I really perform really well. It's not true. It's not true for most people. They don't actually perform better, but they feel that they perform better. But the other thing is the unpredictable stress. And the unpredictable stress, nobody thinks it helps. The unpredictable stress is things like being afraid in the early days of COVID, right? When we don't know what is going on, we're completely worried. People are getting sick. Things like that are happening. People who lose their job, not knowing what will happen. So the unpredictable stress, nobody thinks it's helpful, and that's really, really terrible for performance. There's actually something called the scarcity mindset. And I think one of the most interesting experiments was done on farmers in India. These were farmers who were growing sugarcane. And when they have the sugarcane and they cut it for a crop, they have some money. But if you look 6 weeks before, they are poor. They ran out of money. So harvest season, they have money, then they use it throughout the year. 6 weeks before, they are very, very broke. And they measured their IQ. And what they found was that their IQ was lower by a third when they were poor. Why? Because of the stress. It's not the predictable stress. It says, okay, here's what I need to do and I don't have enough time and let me manage it. It's the fact that part of your brain is continuously busy with what is going to happen, where would I get money, will I be able to feed my kids, could I pay this bill, couldn't I pay this bill? So it's not that their IQ is really going down, it's that their capacity is partially allocated to solving things that have to do with the unpredictable stress of not having money, and they have less capacity to deal with the IQ. So stress is hurting us in deep way.
So Dan, the unpredictable, that doesn't sound like unpredictable stress, knowing that without the sugar cane, they don't have money. That sounds like very predictable, since it's a crop and they have farmers and they grow it. So they know that if they don't have the sugar cane, they'll have less money. When they finally sell it, they'll have more.
What the stress is not coming from the money. The stress comes from, how will I be able to pay my bills? Where will money come from? What will I be able to cut? So it's true that they know that in 6 weeks they'll be okay. But for now, what they need to do, how they need to manage, how are they going to rearrange their resources is very, very tough.
And what about people who have jobs in very high stress situations? Like I'm thinking of, terrorism negotiators or police officers, and those folks that do it and they do it well, even though the stress is so intense. Folks in the military, is it because do they do it better because they do it so often, like the chess player example, or is it?
Yeah. So those jobs have the unpredictable stress, right? If you think about flight controllers or hostage negotiators, those are unpredictable stress. Like, where is it coming from? How is it going to resolve? Lives of people could be at stake. That's unpredictable stress. Very high, very, very difficult to deal with. And they do get better at this. They do get better of compartmentalizing it. But even though they do, those jobs are very tough job, and you see it in outcomes of mental health. You see it with physicians, you see it with those kind of jobs. By the way, I looked at this a few years ago, so this was pre-COVID, but the suicide rate of both flight controllers and physicians is on the rise more than many other professions. And I think part of it is the kind of stress that they have to deal with.
You know, you'd mentioned money earlier in your example of the scarcity model. What about, do people tend to make better decisions when it comes to money, worse decisions? How do people react when it comes to money and their decisions?
Yeah. So first of all, it's important to know that we were not designed evolutionary to deal with money. Money is a relatively new invention. And because of that, we don't have a dedicated part of our brain to help us deal with money rationally. Also, a lot of money is also very complex. There's lots of different mistakes that we make with it. One of them is about short-term versus long-term. And if you think about the question of short-term versus long-term, it's the kind of question that we fail with mostly as humans, right? It's about exercising versus not, taking our medications versus not, sleeping versus not, overeating versus not. I mean, the list goes on, and saving is part of that. So when it comes to money, we're not designed to deal with money, or money is not designed to deal well with our psychology. So we make lots and lots of mistakes. Part of the mistakes are long-term versus short-term. Part of the mistakes have to do with temptations. Part of the mistake have to do with the tools we have to spend money with. And I'll give you one example. There's something called the pain of paying. The pain of paying. So imagine you go to a nice restaurant. You're in New York. You go to a nice restaurant. It's a relatively expensive, let's say $200 per person. And at the end of the meal, you pay either with cash or with credit card. And they ask you, which one is going to feel worse? Now,
I think the cash.
Yeah, the cash, right? Now, it shouldn't feel worse. What does it mean, feeling worse, to spend money? You know the prices. You know, you've seen the menu. Why is the cash going to be more painful? And it turns out it's because the timing of payment and consumption coincide. With the credit card, we just sign. We don't really pay. We'll pay one day when the bill comes. With cash, we pay at that moment. Now, when I teach about the psychology of money, I sometimes bring pizza to class, and I charge students 25 cents per bite. And what do you think happens? What would you guess?
I imagine if they'll pay 25 cents per bite.
They do pay, but they eat very big bites.
Okay.
They sit there with the pizza and they try to be efficient, and they push. And then you could say, oh yeah, after one big bite, they would learn that they're not enjoying it. But no, the temptation is too high, and they keep on stuffing their faces, not enjoying the pizza. And it's because the moment payment is salient, we care more about the payment, we feel the pain of paying, and we sacrifice our experience.
Does that mean that we are more likely we would grow in our decision making with money if we coincided the time that we pay with the result of what we're getting?
So sometimes yes, sometimes no. Like, let's think about the electricity bill. If you pay with a check for your electricity bill, you get the check, you get the bill, you open your checkbook, you write down the number, and you're pissed off a little bit, right? You see the big bill, and you shout at your family members. You say, "Turn off the light, turn off this." Why are you doing that? If you move to no pain of paying, not paying attention, you move it to automatic deduction from your checking account, the electricity expense goes up by about 4%. But we don't stress over it as much because we don't see it. So this is a case where you would probably make better decisions if you wrote a check and got a little bit angry with your family members and everybody constrained their decision making. On the other hand, imagine you're on vacation. You mentioned your timeshare in Sedona. You're going to Sedona, and you're going to sit in some beautiful place and have some martini. And the martini is really expensive. You're sitting in this beautiful place looking at the sunset, beautiful mountains in Sedona, and it's an expensive martini. Now, if you think about if you pay in cash, you might say, let's not buy this martini. If you're doing it with a credit card, you might decide to go for it. Well, maybe that martini would really polish your vacation and be a really good thing. So it's not that I can say, we don't want to die with the most money possible. We want to actually allocate our money in a wise way to get the most joy we can out of what we have. So sometimes we want more pain of paying in order to consume less, maybe in the electricity example. And sometimes we don't want to feel the pain of paying. And if you think about your intuition, when you bought this timeshare in Sedona, you said to yourself, vacations are expensive. Mm-hmm. If every year I will have to spend money on vacation, I don't think I'll spend enough. Mm-hmm. I'll be a workaholic, plus I will not feel like I need to spend this, but I want to force my future self to go on vacation. So let me take that step that would make it feel like cheaper in the future to go on vacation.
That's exactly, it's like you were there in my head, Dan. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Now later life comes in and you don't necessarily get to do it. But
I hadn't gone back once, not once.
You don't have to admit the mistakes here. But the logic is to say, I'm a little stingy. Mm-hmm. I don't like spending money on vacations. Mm-hmm. Let me spend a big amount now. By the way, pain of paying doesn't increase with the amount of money. Like spending $10,000 is not 10 times worse than spending $1,000. So you say, let me do something now that will make my future self more likely to go on vacation, and you're trying to do something like that. So sometimes we recognize our irrationalities and we try to fight them. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes less so.
I want to ask you about group decision making. So I tend to ask a lot of advice when faced with a big decision. Is that a good or bad thing?
So the question is, do the people who are giving you advice have independent opinions that you can aggregate? So if you have 12 different people that each of them has a piece of knowledge about something. So for example, you want to say, okay, I want to get a digital camera. I have 12 friends. They're all different. Let me ask them separately about what they have used and what worked for them and what didn't work for them. These are independent opinions, and then you could expand your scope, understand better, and see where the majority is going. On the other hand, there are things that companies sometimes use called focus groups. And that's about getting people who are amateurs, usually don't know the topic, to come to a room and try to make a decision together. And the joint decision making is usually not a good mechanism. Now, as a metaphor, think about how the stock market works. The stock market doesn't work by getting people to sit in a room and decide what's going to be the stock value for Netflix or Amazon. The stock market works by everybody putting their independent input. Somebody thinks the market is too high, they short. Sometimes they think the value is too low, they buy. But people are not deciding together. It's the mechanism that aggregates independent opinions. That's usually the best way to get people. So you want lots of different opinions, and then you want to aggregate them separately, and not to get people in the same room and say, discuss, come up with some intuition. When people discuss things together, usually the outcome is not a good outcome.
The louder voice tends to prevail.
The louder voice, people tend to agree too soon. There's lots of social dynamics that are difficult. So social psychologists have studied that question for a long, long time. And for a long time, they found that it's a bad idea to think as a group.
I want to bring up a question from one of our members. First, let me say hello to some folks joining all over the world. We've got Cornelia from Germany, James from Bolivia, Asia from Louisiana, and Derek from New Jersey. And Birago is asking, are there tips to consider before making any key decisions? So good actionable advice. Tips to consider before making any key decisions.
Yeah. So there are lots of them, and the course we did on LinkedIn was designed to think about large decision. But I'll give you just one. We talked a little bit about regret, and we talked a little bit about the fact that we have an easier time staying where we are. So imagine you're on a career path, and you can go and stay on your career path, or you can move to another company. And you're considering, should I stay on my career path, or should I move to this other second company? Most likely, you're not thinking of them equally. Why? Because staying in your current career path is easier. It doesn't require any movement. It's easier to imagine. There's no anticipated regret. You will not say, oh, on April 15th, I decided that. It's easier to stay with the career path. And one trick is to try and clear ourselves from this default, from the path of least resistance. So instead of thinking about it is comparing my current career path to a different one, say to yourself, what if I was just given these two job offers? I was working somewhere differently, and I was given two different offers. I was given offer in the company I'm currently working on to do this kind of job, and that's what I knew about it and so on. And I was given this other job in this other. But I'm thinking about both of them on equal footing. I'm not saying, oh, the job I have right now is easier, simpler, and so on. And this way, often people can release themselves. Now, it doesn't release fully because it's like a trick. You're not really have resigned, but it's allow you to view things a bit more objectively, and hopefully make a better decision with that.
You know, in your LinkedIn Learning course, you talk about cancellation, and that I found that was a great tip about how to make decisions. Can you talk a little bit more about cancellation and how that helps us when we have the choices to make?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite words, and I'm not sure if it's a real word or not. But cancellation.
It is now, starting today.
Very good. So imagine that somebody asks you to meet with them, and they say, "Can you meet on June 12th and give a talk, spend some time in brainstorming, whatever?" And you look at your calendar, and you're fully free on that day. So your instinct is to say, yes, why not? Somebody's asking me for advice, some time. I'm a nice person. I like this person. Let me say yes. That's our instinct, is to support other people. But then we say, before you say yes, think about the following. Think about, what if you said yes now, and 2 days from that date, that person canceled. So it's on June 16th, and on June 14th, that person wrote you an email and said, hey, the meeting is canceled. The meeting you promised to come to for brainstorming or whatever is canceled. Would you feel cancellation?
Meaning, would you be happy that meeting got canceled, or that
That's right.
commitment copy?
And if the answer is yes, then maybe don't say yes to that meeting from the beginning. You see, often what happens is that we don't like saying no. All of us, we don't like saying no. So we say yes, and then we regret it later because we have to live with the consequences. So the question is to have a bit more clarity of, are we saying yes because we really want the meeting, or are we saying yes because we're uncomfortable now? And now you could say, oh yes, I would feel tremendous cancellation if it got canceled, but I still feel obligated to say yes. It's fine. But at least try to get your feeling a bit more clarified about the meeting itself, rather about the instant of saying yes or no to it.
Dan, we could continue talking for another half hour, and I wish we could, but we're going to have to leave it here. I want to leave you with one note from our member Rachel, who says, Dan Ariely's work and the way he presents it has fascinated me for years. So Dan, you have a fan in the stream.
Thank you so much.
Dan, thank you for joining our show here on LinkedIn News Live, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Anytime.
And it was an easy decision inviting you on, I'll say that.
Very good. Take care.
That is Dan Ariely. He is professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University, and he is also author of the book Predictably Irrational: The Hidden Forces That Shape Our Decisions. And he is also a teacher at our LinkedIn Learning course. You can check out his course on LinkedIn Learning. And thank you for everyone who participated here on the stream. Unfortunately, we can get to all of your questions, but you can continue the conversation here. You can check out some of our other stories to the right of your feed, or if you're on mobile, you can click into your search box. I'm Nina Melendez. Thank you so much for watching LinkedIn News Live. See you next week.